Hello there. Welcome to Whispers.exe, where the silence watches back. The following story is a work of fiction created for atmospheric and entertainment purposes. With that being said, get comfortable, close your eyes, and let the dark settle in. It begins like most things do, quiet, unnoticed, and far too late to stop. The third knock. She bought the house in late October, when the leaves on the oaks yellowed just enough to hide the rot in their cores, and the dusk fell sooner each day, tucking the valley beneath a bruised sky. Her name was Lenore, though she rarely answered to it. In town, they called her the Quiet Woman on Rook Road, a title that felt less like gossip and more like geographic shorthand. Lenore did not mind. The valley itself seemed unconcerned with names. The air tasted of pine pitch and cold dust, and no matter how sharp the afternoon sun glared through the needles, everything settled into silence by evening. She carried only 2 suitcases and a carved cedar box that she refused to set on bare earth. Inside the box lay letters whose ink had bled into fibrous crescents, the sentences blurred until they resembled dark feathers in water. She stored the box in a closet without a single glance at its contents. Later, she told herself that closets were meant for secrets others had left behind, coats they no longer needed, shoes that pinched, and muted memories, so hers was only keeping with tradition. On her first night, she discovered the house's peculiar heartbeat. The baseboards cracked once at midnight, the rafters sighed twice around 3, and the front door shivered as dawn sprouted, as though the wood felt the chill before the glass did. The noises were ordinary. Lenore decided, settling deeper under the quilt with the smell of old cedar snaking around her. Yet the air was not entirely ordinary. It lingered like someone standing too close, breathing as quietly as possible so the rhythm fell just out of sync with her own. No knock came that first night, nor the second. But on the 9th night, after Lenore spent the day hanging the last of her photographs, all landscape shots of empty beaches and tide pools drained of water, she heard it. A soft, almost polite tap on the front door, one sharp knuckle grazing the wood. Just once. It sounded like an accidental touch, the way you might brush your hand against a wall to steady yourself in the dark. Lenore set down the teacup she had been cradling, steam curling around her wrist like a living thread. She waited, listening for a follow-up rap, the assertive kind of knock that demanded acknowledgement. Nothing. When she finally opened the door, the porch was empty, the path mute beneath a veil of fog. Pine silhouettes shimmered like tall, patient witnesses, their tips dissolved in the mist. A second night passed. Again, one gentle knock, then silence thick as wax. She opened the door quicker this time, hopeful. Of what she did not know. No footprint marred the dew. No scuff on the step hinted at a prankster's flight. It was the third night that the pattern revealed itself. 3 knocks, each unlike the last. The first came light and tentative. The second arrived a breath later, slower, like a hesitant decision taking form. The third never came, because she opened the door before it could. Something about that unfinished sequence left Lenore unsettled. It was a melody missing its final note, a question without a mark, a joke paused before the punchline. For 30 minutes, she stood on the porch, scanning the woods, inhaling cool air until her lungs ached. Somewhere beyond the tree line, an owl called and received no answer. When she stepped back inside, the warmth met her like a closed mouth. She bolted the lock, checked the windows, and climbed the stairs without looking over her shoulder, certain that looking would grant shape to a presence too thin for sight. She lay awake until morning, waiting for the non-existent third knock to echo inside her skull. 3 weeks into winter, the valley darkened early, the sky turning slate by 4 in the afternoon. Lenore began to prepare herself each evening. Tea steeped, lamps dimmed, shoes laced for an expedient trip to the door. The knocks never strayed from their ritual. A month later, she developed a troublesome habit, one she recognized but could not resist. Each night just before 9, Lenore would place her ear against the front door, her breath fogging the painted wood, and listen for footsteps she never heard. The silence on the other side was complete, so complete it seemed to swallow her own pulse. She wondered if sound could be stolen, if the air beyond the threshold was learning her heartbeat in order to play it back later. She tried to distract herself with old hobbies, watercolor landscapes, half-remembered piano scales, the diaries she kept when she was 12 and believed her handwriting could bind time. Nothing held her attention long enough. The entire house felt pitched forward, as though bracing for impact. One night, snow fell in fine shards that caught on the porch light like dust turned visible. Lenore waited by the door, hand on the knob. The first knock came, feather soft yet distinct. She counted to 3, knowing the second would follow at what had become a predictable rhythm. It did, a deliberate pause between them. She inhaled, palm tingling, and opened the door before breath left her lungs. Nothing. Except this time, the porch light flickered, and the snow swirling beyond the steps parted around a shape she could not quite focus on. It looked less like a body and more like the absence of one, a silhouette carved from motion itself, edges stuttering as though unsure where skin should end. The shape dissolved when she blinked, leaving only spirals of snow and the sharp scent of pine. She closed the door very slowly, feeling the weight of it in her shoulders. For the first time, she considered staying elsewhere for the night, a motel in town, perhaps the spare room at the librarian's house, anywhere with walls that did not anticipate touch. She stood in the foyer, keys in hand, for what felt like hours. Eventually, the radiator clicked, issuing a hiss like distant applause, and Lenore found herself walking upstairs, lingering halfway because steps above felt disloyal to the impulse below. That night, the third knock happened in her dream. She stood in the kitchen. Moonlight filtered through the window, silvering the counter. The room looked precisely as it did when she left it, except the kettle whistled and she had not turned on the stove. Then she heard the first knock, no more than a finger brushing glass. The second resounded against the wall behind her, too high to be at door level, too soft to be a fist. And when the third came, it was inside her skull, vibrating her teeth like a tuning fork. She woke with blood on her tongue and the taste of copper blooming thickly. Morning delivered a pale sun and the hush of fresh snow covering the road. No tire tracks cut the blanket and no birds argued in the pines. Lenore found thin scratches on the front door, 3 vertical lines, faint and shallow, as though a child had dragged a stick lightly over wet paint. She traced them with her index finger. They did not cut the grain. Instead, they seemed to hover just above it. She rubbed her temples and resolved to call someone, anyone. A friend in the city she had not spoken to since moving, the mail carrier who always smiled kindly, the sheriff whose number was printed on every community bulletin. But she could not think of what to say that wouldn't sound fevered. I keep inviting silence into my house, and now it is rearranging the furniture of my mind. Lenore turned the kettle on, ignoring the small tremor in her wrist. The water whined as it heated. When the whistle finally rose, she nearly dropped the mug, convinced it was the third knock in disguise. That evening, she left every lamp ablaze, the house glowing like an ember in the valley. Shadows retreated into corners, but she felt them crouching, patient. She paced until her footsteps blended with the heartbeat of the floors. The first knock came promptly, polite, nearly gracious. She exhaled. The second landed a moment later, deliberate and slower, a snowflake settling on glass. Lenore reached for the knob, paused, withdrew her hand. She let the third knock arrive, or tried to. Seconds stretched open. No third knock sounded. Silence thickened until the ceiling seemed to bend under its weight. Lenore forced herself toward the door, put her ear against it. She thought she heard breathing, but it could have been the echo of her own. She opened the door. Outside, the porch boards were bare of snow. Something invisible had paced there, warming the wood enough to melt the powder. 3 footprints. No, 3 impressions shaped like crescents, equidistant, each one wider than a human shoulder. They formed an arc that faced the doorway, like a creature had stopped just short of crossing the threshold, leaning forward to smell the heat inside. She closed the door, double-locked it, and turned. In that instant, the house became an unfamiliar chapel of hush. Every surface glowed and pulsed. She could not explain how she knew, but she was certain the rest of the knocks, the dozens, the hundreds left unknocked, were now inside with her, lining the walls the way sound lines a shell. A quiet creak sounded behind her. She spun. The coat closet door had opened a sliver. From within, darkness slightly deeper than the hallways. Lenore stared until her vision watered, expecting it to separate from shadow. Nothing. She approached the closet on bare feet, floorboards chilling her soles. The door drifted wider, as if pushed by a draft that did not exist. Inside, she saw her cedar box lying on its side, its lid open, letters scattered like shed feathers. The ink appeared fresh, glistening, letters drifting across the pages as though still being written. She knelt, heart thrashing. Words crawled across one envelope, rearranging themselves faster than she could read. Then 3 small dots formed, paused, and erased themselves. The pages fell still. Lenore closed the box, hands shaking. She lifted it, surprised by its sudden lightness. Empty, perhaps. She did not check. The stairs behind her groaned. No weight pressed them, yet each step sounded as if a foot descended carefully. Once, twice. Then they stopped. Lenore backed away until the hallway ended against her spine. She gripped the cedar box like a shield. She realized the house had no mirrors. She had taken them down her first week, claiming she disliked reflections after dark. She recalled wrapping each mirror in cloth and storing them in the attic. Now she regretted it, craving confirmation that her face still belonged to her. A breeze kissed her neck. She turned. The front door stood ajar, letting moonlight drag across the rug in a pale ribbon. Snowflakes drifted in, melting instantly on the threshold. Lenore walked to the doorway, drawn by cold or compulsion. She could not tell. Outside, the porch sat empty. The impressions had vanished beneath a new layer of powder. She stepped onto the topmost plank. The night smelled of iron, tinged with cedar. Pines stretched their arms overhead, tips trembling in a quiet wind. From behind her, the first knock sounded, soft against the inside of the open door. Lenore froze. The second came slower, near her ear level, as though the wood itself had formed a knuckle. She waited for the third. It never came. Because she was already outside, and the door closed without her touch, sealing the house like a held breath. The porch light extinguished. Lenore faced the door's blank surface, feeling the cold seep through her socks. She raised her hand to knock, hesitated, let it fall. Something shifted behind the door, like furniture dragged or a body exhaling at great length. She pressed her palm to the wood. It felt feverish despite the winter chill. The door was no longer hers to open. She stepped backward into the snow, breath clouding. Moonlight painted everything a lucid silver, except the windows, which swallowed light entirely, reflecting nothing. The house resembled a stage prop waiting for actors unwilling to appear. A branch snapped in the tree line. Lenore turned toward the sound. The pines shivered, shedding white dust. Between 2 trunks stood a void shaped like a doorway, taller than any normal threshold, edges wavering as though carved from wind. She did not see what waited inside, only how the snow refused to settle within the silhouette. Lenore clutched the cedar box tighter. Inside, she felt movement, a pulse beating not unlike her own, but out of sync, a half step behind. She thought perhaps the box had become the third knock, carrying it wherever she went, requiring only her hesitation to manifest. Something brushed her shoulder, cold yet weightless. She spun. Nothing. The trees whispered, rid of their snow. In their murmurs, she imagined words. Come in, come out. Invitations spoken by bark that never learned a tongue, but understood its hunger. She looked back at the house. Behind the curtainless windows, darkness pressed against glass, curious. Shadows pressed like faces, their features undefined, their gazes certain. Lenore's reflection did not appear. The first knock sounded from the woods this time, a muffled tap against unseen bark. The second followed, slower, echoing higher in the canopy. And the third arrived inside her chest, a single heavy beat that did not fade, spreading downward until her knees trembled and upward until her vision blurred at the edges. She understood then. The knocks were never a question. They were the answer to one she had not thought to ask. They were permission, granted or revoked depending on the speed of her curiosity. Lenore walked toward the tree line, snow swallowing her footsteps as quickly as she made them. The void between the trunks widened. Inside, the air glowed faintly, like distant headlights through fog. A final sound reached her, neither knock nor voice, but the hush of a door unlocking far behind. She paused but did not turn. That house no longer held her name. The valley had stripped it, leaving only its echo. She stepped between the trees, the glow folded around her, cold as breath on glass, warm as a secret kept too long. The woods closed, merging the trunks until the path behind vanished. Some nights, the villagers say, 3 knocks drift down Rook Road, one soft, one slower, and one that never comes from outside. They find no tracks, only crescent impressions that melt before sunrise. And when they speak of the quiet woman who once lived there, they do so softly, as though any louder might complete a sequence best left unfinished. Because the third knock is patient, and patience, like darkness, never leaves when invited in. Months drifted past the way mist slinks between pines, unnoticed until it drenches the lungs. In February, the postal route on Rook Road changed hands. The new carrier Marisol noted the abandoned house only because letters addressed to a Lenore Kane still filled one melting blue mailbox. She slid each envelope through the slot despite the warped hinge, telling herself the woman might return once winter broke. By March, the chimney had stopped exhaling the faint smells of cedar and dust. Ice fingers clung to the gutters, but the porch planks stayed inexplicably bare, as if foot traffic, unseen, uncounted, kept the wood warm. Marisol mentioned this oddity at the diner one evening, stirring her coffee so slowly the spoon never rang against the cup. The cook, an older man who preferred radio static to conversation, looked up just long enough to say the valley protected its own quiet. Then he twisted the dial louder, hissing snow blotting the silence. Marisol's curiosity calcified when the first package arrived. A slim box, return address smudged beyond recognition, its cardboard damp as if carried under an unfinished rain cloud. She laid it on Lenore's doorstep, but the image of it lingered all through her route, a splinter pacing beneath her thoughts. That night, the package reappeared in her dreams, rattling softly, a lullaby inside an eggshell. Morning found the box still on the step. Another day passed. By late dusk, wind unfurled the wrapping like a peeled husk. Something pale rested within, 3 small crescents of wood, curved as waning moons, their surfaces slick with frozen sap. Marisol stood at the edge of the porch, breath steaming, feeling watched by the door's brass knocker that hadn't moved in months. She could almost hear it, though, a phantom rap below her heartbeat. Once, twice, then nothing. Back in town, the sound followed her, tucked behind engine noise and idle chatter. She heard it while shelving canned peaches in the pantry, while brushing teeth to the rhythm of a leaking faucet, while folding laundry in hours long after midnight. Knock, softer than bone against wood. Knock as patient as snow melt. Knock, never delivered, leaving expectation hanging like a noose on a bare branch. By April, Marisol began opening packages meant for Lenore. It was federal offense, she knew, but compulsion outweighed consequence. The contents stayed consistent, crescent slivers, some of cedar, some of birch, once a piece of blackened oak charred at one end. Each smelled faintly of cold smoke and silt. She arranged them on her kitchen table, forming incomplete circles that seemed to recoil from closure. When she tried to push the edges together, the pieces shifted, sliding away as if guided by air currents too deliberate to be accidental. She left them, half moons across the laminate, and went to bed with the bedroom door ajar. At 3:17 a.m., the same moment Lenore once heard rafters sighing, the first knock sounded from within Marisol's hall closet. She sat up, throat tight. The second knock rang from the pantry below, slower, as if traveling through syrup. She waited for the third, clutching the sheet to quell the tremor in her hands. Silence coated the house, thick as wax. She rose, feet numb against floorboards cooled by spring night. The hallway stretched longer than she remembered, corners bending like soft tin. At the closet door, she hesitated, palm hovering. Behind the wood, she thought she heard paper sliding over paper, letters rearranging themselves in the dark, practicing new addresses. She opened the door. Inside hung an unfamiliar coat, heavy wool dusted with pine needles, smelling of wet leaves and absence. In its pocket waited a letter addressed in trembling ink, Marisol Reyes, but the handwriting shifted even as she stared, letters bending into her childhood nickname, then her mother's maiden name, then a blank her eyes could not decipher. She closed the closet without touching the coat. Downstairs, the table lay empty. The crescent pieces had vanished, the laminate holding only faint impressions in a ring of frost. She touched the cold, drew a circle with her finger. Vapor rose like breath. On Sunday, Marisol drove to the sheriff's office, box of opened mail on the passenger seat. She rehearsed explanations, vandalism, stalking, perhaps a prank, but each sentence thinned into nonsense by the time she parked. The front desk bell refused to ring when pressed. In the dim waiting room, a police scanner murmured half frequencies. Rook Road, negative contact, advise quiet. She left without filing a report, ashamed of the relief stirring under her ribs. Early May brought thaw. Mud swallowed the gravel. The house on Rook Road shed icicles like brittle teeth. Yet the porch remained pristine, a sunlit plank amid muck. Marisol felt a tug every time she passed. Soon she began lingering after deliveries, fingertips brushing the doorknob slick with condensation. One afternoon, she found the door ajar, the interior yawning cool. She stepped inside only far enough to deposit the stack of letters onto the hall table, then noticed the cedar scent. Impossibly fresh. It reminded her of churches left empty too long, holy dust and echoes of hymns. The letters fluttered as though a breath passed over them. She retreated, shutting the door. The bolt clicked itself home without her touch. That night, thunder rolled over the mountains, flashing crooked bones across the sky. Marisol dreamt of Lenore walking the tree line, palms open, collecting something invisible raining from the branches. In the dream, Lenore turned, and where her eyes should be, crescent hollows glimmered white with starlight. Lightning woke Marisol. The house creaked with wind. She padded to the kitchen for water and found 3 wooden crescents on the counter, beaded with rain. She swallowed panic with the metallic tang of thirst and left them where they lay. On June 2nd, mail service to 1181 Rook Road was suspended, undeliverable, resident unknown. Marisol felt both lighter and unmoored, as if a thin thread had been snipped behind her heart, yet the route still carried her past the house. She started slowing, then braking, then parking at the edge of the drive to gaze at windows reflecting nothing but the road she stood on. One morning she brought coffee, perched on a porch step that seemed warmer than the air. Steam curled and lingered close, reluctant to rise. She spoke aloud, words of apology that sounded too soft too late. With each syllable, the steam shapes twisted, forming half rings, thinning then knitting back together, always 2/3 complete. Wind rattled the mailbox flag, up, down, stuttering like an indecisive metronome. When it stilled, Marisol noticed a package inside, addressed to her this time, handwriting identical to the letters she had delivered for months, yet ink wet as though penned seconds prior. She tore the paper. Inside, a key the color of snowlight, teeth ground into 3 uneven points. Beneath it, one sentence. For when you pause, too long. She weighed the key in her palm until it grew hot, pocketed it, started the mail truck and drove until the house shrank to a smudge between trees. But the warmth of the key pressed through denim like a coal. 3 towns over lived an archivist named Jonah, collector of regional folklore. Marisol visited, clutching the key and a story she feared would wither in daylight. Jonah listened, frowned. He rummaged through brittle clippings like microfiche, found mention of the knock sequence dating back to homestead days. Doors opening themselves, half-heard courting taps in the pines, disappearances noted only by vacant chair places at Sunday service. 3 impressions in snow. Houses that learned their residents by heart and hollowed them out from within. He warned her, do not answer the first knock. Do not time the second. When the third arrives anywhere but the threshold, it is already inside. His advice ended where superstition ran dry. Locks fail, Jonah said. Pauses invite. Marisol left the archive with dusk pooling between buildings. The key pulsed like a thumbnail struck too hard. She imagined throwing it into the river, felt the water accepting it without a splash, yet knew it would roll back to her doorstep, patient. That night, she lay on the couch to avoid the hall closet. Rain pattered, soft percussion. She drifted near sleep when the first knock touched the window pane, careful as fingertip to glass. She steadied her breath. The second knock spread across the roof, slower, like a palm stroking slate. She gripped the key. Silence followed. 1 minute. 2. 10. Still no third. She nearly sobbed with relief until she felt vibration in her pocket. The key tremored, tapping her thigh in a muffled cadence. 1. Pause. 1. Longer pause. 1. Gentle as heartbeats turned articulate. Marisol closed her fist around it. The tapping stopped. She rose, legs weak, and stepped into the hallway. The closet door stood ajar, wool coat inside swaying without draft. She opened it wider. From the coat's sleeve fell a single wooden crescent, landing upright, curving toward her like a half smile. She placed the key beside it, not sure why, only that they belonged together. The crescent shifted, aligning hollow to tooth, forming 2/3 of a hidden hole. She shut the closet and returned to the couch just before dawn. Morning sunlight felt thin, brittle. She brewed coffee, found no sugar, though she remembered buying some. In the pantry lay 3 identical boxes of salt, each open, each 2/3 full. She stared until the grains blurred into tiny crescents. That afternoon, thunderheads bullied the horizon. She drove to Rook Road with no male excuse, parking at the edge of the drive. The house absorbed the overcast glow, boards humming in low baritone. She stepped onto the porch. The door unlocked at her touch, sighing inward. Inside, air smelled of cedar freshly split, sap singing of long summers. Letters littered the floor in swirling patterns, not one envelope sealed. At the center sat the cedar box, lid closed though a thread of light leaked between seams. Marisol approached. Her shoes squeaked once, twice. She hesitated, the pause older than language, then opened the lid. The letters inside were blank. A hush descended, thick as velvet. She felt rather than heard a knock from below the floorboards. First, tentative. A second answered from the ceiling, slower. She clutched the box, bracing for the third. Silence. She realized why she was holding it. Her pulse synced to a rhythm not her own, a triple beat missing its final echo. The house inhaled. Floorboards bowed subtly, urging her toward the doorway. Outside, rain began, soft needles through pine. She carried the box onto the porch and set it at the threshold, crescent slivers arranged inside like teeth awaiting the jaw. Wind scattered papers down Rook Road, white birds in stormlight. Marisol descended the steps, feeling each plank grow colder once her weight left it. By the time she reached the truck, the porch looked frosted again, untouched. From the cab, she watched the door close itself. The mailbox flag jerked up, down, up, then stilled exactly 2/3 raised. She drove away, wipers smearing water that sounded like distant, polite applause. 3 days later, the route map pinned in the post office changed. Rook Road sectioned off with a red line. Temporary hazard, manager said. Landslide threat. No one protested. Marisol filed new paperwork, reassigned to sunnier streets closer to town square. Yet the engine of her dreams idled elsewhere, in pine-shadowed valleys where pauses stretched wide as doorways and patience counted breaths 1, 2, waiting to become 3. Sometimes just before dawn, she swears she hears it, a soft beckoning beyond the walls, a knock that could be rain, could be memory. She does not rise. But her heart answers anyway, skipping a single beat, finishing what the night began. In late July, heat crawled down from the ridgeline, turning the valley air thick and syrup-slow. Cicadas droned without cadence, as if refusing to share time with anything that counted. Marisol walked her new route beneath awnings of wisteria, pretending the flower's perfume masked pine sap that never belonged on these streets. Still, resin clung to the back of her tongue. On a Wednesday morning, filmy with humidity, she unlocked her post office box to find an unstamped envelope resting alone, its paper the shade of early frost. No return address, no barcode, only her name, written in that quavering script that felt less like ink than shadow pressed into pulp. She glanced around the lobby, empty except for the rotary fans slicing warm air. Inside the envelope lay a photograph. At first glance, it showed an empty stretch of woods at dusk, all mauve haze and black trunks. But when she leaned closer, the grain resolved into the faint outline of a porch, barely visible through trees that had no business standing so densely together. She recognized the angle. It was taken from an impossible vantage, far deeper in the pines than any lens could focus through. Yet the porch looked freshly swept. In the lower left corner, someone had embossed 3 crescent shapes, overlapping like phases of an eclipse. Marisol flipped the photo, 3 words inked in neat block letters: "The threshold moves." She spent the afternoon tasting those words. They felt sharp, surgical, the way cold metal touches a nerve. Her supervisor called twice, voice echoing across sorting machines, asking why Segment 14's parcels were late. She apologized, invented traffic. Her lips moved, but her concentration wound through cedar boards and warm porch planks. The threshold moves, a doorway untethered from walls, drifting like pollen on slack wind. That night, she locked every window, laid the photograph face down beneath a stack of magazines, poured a drink she didn't finish. The key lay on her bedside table, teeth glinting each time passing headlights crawled across the curtains. She could not recall placing it there. Thunder gathered after midnight, distant but insistent. She waited for knocks that did not come, only the slow, deliberate drip of rain from the eaves. Between droplets hid a wider silence, one that felt alive, waiting for her to label it the wrong way so it could wear that name and step inside. Just before 4, electricity failed. The fan stuttered to stillness, and the refrigerator settled with a sigh. In the hush, Marisol caught a sound in the hallway. Paper sliding across linoleum. She rose, pulse hammering. Candlelight distorted door frames, stretching them tall enough for other species. In the kitchen lay the photograph, face up now, color drained by flicker. The porch in the picture was no longer empty. A figure stood at its exact center, a dark silhouette leaning forward, one arm lifted as though knocking on glass between worlds. On the table beside the photo rested a new crescent, carved from something black and fibrous, edges frayed like burnt rope. The curve pointed toward the hallway, inviting or warning. She could not decide which. Wind groaned through the house, though no window was open. The front door rattled not from impact, but from breath, each panel flexing inward, then relaxing. Marisol remembered Jonah's caution, locks fail, and pressed her palm to the deadbolt. It was ice cold, sweating in the heat. She whispered, "Not tonight." The door hushed. Boards behind her creaked twice, soft, slower. She forced herself to remain still, refusing to give the silence a third footfall. Morning light revealed warped photos curling under kitchen heat. The silhouette had vanished. Where it stood remained a pale outline shaped like absence. She lifted the image. Beneath, the countertop bore 3 shallow indentations, half-moons scooped neatly from laminate. She traced the grooves until fingertips prickled with pins of static. She called Jonah, voice quivering more than the telephone line. He answered on the 5th ring, drowsy. When she spoke of moving thresholds, he grew abrupt. Doorways aren't places, they're relationships. If one side wanders, the other follows. What do I do? Break the relationship, he said. Starve it of recognition. How? He hesitated. You know the rule of 3s, he said at last. Complete nothing. Then he hung up. Marisol spent the day discarding patterns. She brewed coffee but poured it after the second drip. She wrote sentences with 2 words only. She tore grocery lists before adding a third item. Her body rebelled, thirst unquenched, language stunted, but she pressed on, teeth rattling with incomplete rhythms. Dusk slouched over rooftops, cicadas stilled. She sat in the living room, lights off, counting each distant car to 2, never 3. The key and crescent lay on the coffee table, separated by inches that felt wider every hour. The first knock sounded on the back door, gentle, polite. Marisol inhaled, exhaled once. The second came slower, against the side window. She gripped the couch cushion, refusing to turn. Silence billowed, heavy as wool. Minutes pooled, no third. She almost smiled, relief sour and bright. Then the key slid across the table on its own, metal scraping wood with deliberate rhythm. One short shift forward, pause, another, longer. It stopped just shy of the crescent, the half circle now trembling toward alignment. Marisol lunged, snatching the key. The crescent fell still. She wrapped key and crescent in dish towels, layered them inside a shoebox, wound tape around until her hands ached, then shoved the bundle beneath the bathroom sink behind cleaning bottles. She slammed the cabinet twice, stopped before a third. Water pipes groaned. From the drain rose a muffled thud, soft, slower. She fled the bathroom, nearly laughing at the absurdity of plumbing that learned to knock. Sleep arrived in ragged stitches. Near dawn, she dreamed she was inside Lenore's house, walls breathing like enormous lungs. On every surface lay broken frames, the photographs replaced by mirrors of dull tin. Each mirror showed a hallway lined indoors, but no matter which angle she turned, she faced away from herself. A voice whispered behind her teeth, "The threshold moves." She awoke with her face wet, unsure if tears or condensation. The shoebox under the sink was gone. In its place lay the cedar box, lid closed, edges beaded with moisture. The letters inside shifted as she lifted it, weight sloshing like liquid memory. She dropped it, stumbled backward. The bathroom mirror, always fogged after showers, cleared on its own. Words formed in evaporating mist. Knock when ready. She shouted, a brief, feral sound that bounced down hallways emptier than before. No echo returned, only the hush of something listening closely. That evening, she didn't bother with half measures. She drove through valleys silvered by dying light, past orchards humming with unsigned lullabies, until the gravel of Rook Road crackled beneath tires. The hazard tape at the turnoff fluttered like weak applause. She tore through it, dust blooming behind as she parked before the silent house. Porch steps greeted her with unexpected warmth. Door unlocked at first touch. Inside smelled of fresh rain and static like television snow glimpsed in childhood. Letters littered the foyer in spirals, words crawling across pages, rewriting themselves mid-crawl. She whispered, I am not yours, but ink shifted to spell her name across 8 envelopes. She kicked them aside, crossed into the parlor where moonlight draped a grandfather clock that hadn't ticked in decades. Its pendulum swung now, but only 2/3 of an arc, clacking against inertia. With each partial swing, the floor thudded, soft, slower. She grabbed the pendulum mid-arc. A thin scream rose from metal, cut off as she snapped the rod. The clock's face cracked down its center, splitting the SWEV numeral so only the I and second I remained. She threw the pendulum through a window. Glass shattered, night wind rushing in one great exhalation. Still no third knock. A door in the hallway creaked. She turned, footsteps silent now on wood that held breath. The closet at corridor's end stood open. Within, the wool coat hung flayed, sleeves empty. On the floor lay the shoebox, tape unwound. Key and crescents sat assembled into a perfect circle, teeth meeting hollows so seamlessly the seam vanished. It looked less like an object and more like an aperture, an iris waiting to dilate. She knelt, pulse hammering. 1, 2, 1, 2. Shadow pooled in the circle's center, deep enough to swallow dust motes. She lifted the ring. It was lighter than thought. Behind her, boards shifted. The first knock. She rose. The hallway lamp flickered, filament buzzing like trapped wasp. The second knock resounded from the ceiling above, deliberate, stretching seconds apart as if savoring space. She raised the ring, palms sweating. Somewhere inside, a third beat thrummed, eager. She remembered Jonah. Complete nothing. Yet here she was, holding completion shaped into wood and steel. She inhaled once, exhaled. Then she bent the ring until it splintered, fragments snapping with soft pops like joints releasing after prayer. Splinters flew, burying into drywall, into carpet, into skin of her forearms. Pain burned cold. She screamed, raw sounds swallowed by the house. Wind rushed the corridor, sucking letters off the floor, spiraling them upward in a paper cyclone. Ink bled midair, pooling into droplets that shimmered before vanishing. Lights strobed, the wool coat lifted, sleeves filling with invisible anatomy, buttons rattling as if fastening themselves to a chest long lost. Marisol stumbled backward, heels finding the threshold of the front door. She realized the frame here was wider now, almost arch-like, as though grown to accommodate something broader than human shoulders. A single splinter of the ring pulsed at her feet, beating like a tiny heart, 1 pause, 2 pause, refusing a third. She kicked it outside. The splinter landed on the porch and went still. Rain began, sudden and drenching, sheet upon sheet. The porch boards hissed, steam ghosting upward. She stepped through the doorway until half her body hung in downpour, half in humming foyer. The house groaned, a hurt animal denied its final meal. Hands, cold as stone, soft as smoke, closed around her shoulders, pushing not inward but aside, guiding her so the doorway stood clear. She whirled, but saw nothing. Only the coat collapsing onto floorboards, empty again. Out in the yard, pines leaned under storm weight, branches flailing slow. Between trunks, a new porch glimmered, half apparent. She understood then. Every refusal, every pause she birthed, forced the threshold elsewhere, sent it wandering for more willing structures. Doorways were relationships. Break one, another begins. Lightning forked, showing the apparition porch occupied by a silhouette, tall, bent forward, arm lifting in mid-knock. She watched the hand pause, then drop, unfinished. Every tree became a doorframe, every shadow a foyer. She whispered, "Not here," though rain drowned the words. The silhouette stepped back. The pines stilled. In her periphery, Marisol sensed the house behind her shrinking, boards sighing with relinquished tension. She turned, walls dulled, cedar scent fading. The letters lay flat now, ordinary paper. The closet door closed on its own with a faint click. She walked onto the drive, rain plastering hair to cheeks. Gravel shifted underfoot with each heartbeat. No soft knock followed, no slower second. The valley around her overflowed with incomplete echoes, but none claimed voice. At the truck door, she paused, habit more than fear. Somewhere far inside the night, she thought she heard an owl call, unanswered. She opened the door, climbed in. Engine coughed to life. Wipers smeared water into ghost shapes that peeled away. As she drove, lightning receded, taking the storm with it. Headlights skimmed wet asphalt, beads flowing off glass like sentences unwritten. She looked in the rearview mirror only once. Where Rook Road curved behind her, darkness folded into itself, hiding porches, doorways, entire houses whose hearts beat out of step with the people inside. When she reached town, the fanlight over the post office lobby glowed steady. She parked, engine ticking with cooling metal. In her pocket lay the smallest fragment of the broken ring, unnoticed until now. She felt its dull pulse, one, pause, one, still refusing a third. She thought of rivers swallowing keys, of thresholds adrift on wind like dandelion seeds. Inside the lobby, she placed the fragment into her P.O. box, shut the door, then opened it again. It was gone. Only a faint crescent impression remained on the metal floor, already fading. She closed the box, locked it twice, stopped before a third. Outside, dawn edged the horizon, sky bruised to lavender. Cicadas resumed their droning, settling into a rhythm just shy of counting. Marisol breathed with them, soft, slower. The third breath she held and did not release, walking towards sunlight that broke incomplete across the street, leaving her shadow unfinished on the pavement behind. Her lungs burned, but she clenched the breath as though it were a door she alone could keep shut. Each step drew her deeper into morning. Each footfall felt like tearing fabric from some larger, unseen weave. When she finally let the air escape, it came out in two thin streams, never a third, dissolving before it reached the warmth of sunrise. Across the street, an old cafe unlocked its front door. The bell above the frame chimed twice and stilled. Inside, patrons gathered in pairs, conversations beginning but never finishing, mugs lifted, then set down, half empty. Marisol watched, heart measuring time in incomplete beats. She entered, sat near the window, ordered coffee without sugar. The waitress poured exactly 2 fingers' depth, no more. Steam coiled upward, folded into crescent shapes, and vanished. Marisol lifted the cup, hesitated, then drank only a single swallow. Bitterness coated her tongue. She welcomed the unfinished taste. Outside, a delivery truck backed up to the curb, gears grinding out a stuttering rhythm. One jerk, pause, one longer grind, before the engine cut. The driver hopped down, slid a package onto the sidewalk, and left the door wide. Cardboard flaps beat softly in the breeze, trying to close but missing every third attempt. Marisol rose, coins rattling in her fist. 2. No third. She stepped through sunlight that still refused her complete silhouette. At the package, she knelt, reading a name smudged into near illegibility. Only 3 letters remained clear, M-A-R. Enough. She touched the damp paper. The box was light, hollow. She folded the flaps down once, then again, leaving a sliver open to the sky. A gust slid past, catching the gap. Air hummed inside the carton, soft, slower. Nothing followed. She smiled, thin, exhausted, real. With deliberate care, she carried the parcel to a public bin and dropped it top first. The lid thudded twice. She placed her hand on the metal a final moment, feeling for the tremor that might seek her pulse. It did not come. Walking away, she counted the echoing clangs of her steps. 1, breathe. 2, breathe. Letting the third remain forever unspoken, a space she could live beside without needing to cross. In that silent interval, the valley exhaled, doorways settled, and for the first time since winter, the road behind her stayed still. She kept walking, neither inviting nor denying what followed, only moving forward through light that, little by little, learned to finish tracing her shadow again.